What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Chances are you've never come across the abbreviation VKR, which in Russian stands for Внутрикамерная разработка. I know it's a tongue twister, don't worry about remembering how it is pronounced, just remember the abbreviation VKR. Well, it is more than enough. But yeah, this phenomenon is apparently a critical piece of the puzzle in understanding modern Russian reality. In a system that already thrives on secrecy, double standards, and backroom deals, the idea of voluntarily cooperating prisoners, people who go behind bars on their own free will just to help security forces, well, it adds another very murky layer. The authorities might tell you it's about catching criminals more effectively or managing and maintaining order, but the truth is much darker. Individuals are forced into self-incrimination, political enemies are entrapped, and inmates who want an easy ride or a bit of cash, they become pawns in the twisted game. Today, let's explore how VKR actually works and see how it recently affected a former Moscow district deputy Alexey Gorinov. Because apparently, almost no one talks about this person, who seems to be one of Putin's potentially even biggest enemies. He was so afraid of him, or maybe the knowledge that he possesses, that he had to apply VKR methods to him, which became one of the main reasons why we never heard about him in the first place, until recently. Let's start by unpacking the nature of VKR. Lawyers in Russia describe this practice as a hidden arrangement between law enforcement officers and select inmates who agree to re-enter prison or remain behind bars for money, reduced sentences, or improved living conditions. Sometimes it's all three. Once inside, these individuals look and behave like ordinary inmates, but they are in reality on the state's payroll. The security forces falsify entire criminal cases to make these agents look like legitimate prisoners. For example, they might invent a story about theft, have the agent sign on as accused, and later drop the charges once the agent's work is complete. It's a disturbing level of orchestration that shows that just how far the government wants to go to secure convictions or compile incriminating evidence against targeted individuals. You might think that the regime of Putin is so powerful it can just jail whoever they want. And this might be true on its own. But in order to avoid any suspicion, drama or potential unrests, sometimes they have to go through such additional steps just to perfect the incarceration of a person. That's precisely why we do not hear so much about political prisoners, what they did and what they stood for. For the authorities, this arrangement kills multiple birds with the one stone. They can fabricate confessions, eavesdrop on private conversations, or even pin additional charges on a suspect who is already in custody. And the best part, from the perspective of law enforcement, is that all these shady maneuvers remain hidden behind concrete walls, away from the public eye. You will not see mainstream media news outlets talking about a staged theft or an inmate who was conveniently caught, quote-unquote, with something. To the average Russian or even to international observers, it all looks like just routine policing. In reality, this system extends the regime's long arm into the prisons, turning every stone cell into a potential trap. But sometimes, even this might not be enough. Sometimes it is not just quote-unquote, once again, regular inmates who volunteer to go to jail for some cash. Sometimes the prisoner in question might be such an influential figure or have an extreme level of dirt on some high-ranking officials that the entire FSB, former KGB, has to get involved. And this is exactly what happened to Alexey Gorinov, the former Moscow district deputy, who it looks like had some very juicy stuff on Putin or somebody from his inner circle. We'll talk about in more details about his particular case in a couple of minutes, because first, in order to have a full picture, I think it is important to talk about the inhumane nature of VKR and how it can destroy lives of innocent people. One of the chilling aspects of VKR is that law enforcement can outsource violence, intimidation, and even psychological pressure to these planted inmates. Prison itself is already a pretty violent place, which has its own set of rules, regulations, and authorities within the inmates. Some people will never see the outside of prison walls anymore, so they decide to rebuild the society within according to their own broken and flawed logic. So adding even more violence and pressure to this system can and will break a lot of people who ended up in such place against their will. Authorities know that if an operative or a police officer walks into a cell and beats a detainee, this might create a trail of evidence or generate embarrassing headlines. But if a fellow inmate commits the violence, it is far easier to explain away as a dispute among criminals. Officially, the prison staff can literally wash their hands, claiming they had no knowledge of what happened until it was too late. When was the last time you guys read the news about some brawl in your local county jail? I don't think it ever happened. This opens the door for physical harm and mental torment that rarely makes it into court documents and official records. People who are targeted by VKR, particularly political activists, often find themselves left with no one to defend them. There is no one in the cell who is not under the watchful eye of the authorities, and certainly no sympathy from the guards. Even if you are innocent or merely awaiting trial, once you're inside a cell with a VKR agent, you become a potential stepping stone for the agent to earn even more favor from the government. It's a cycle of exploitation where the prisoner turned collaborator collects rewards for trapping others, and authorities report their statistics by claiming they have uncovered new crimes. Now this sounds like a more familiar news headlines to you guys, right? Especially if the crime is so complicated and the authorities do not want to deal with it, they just might put all the charges against one poor fella, who just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Decades later, the truth might come out, but there will be different people to deal with the consequences. New police sheriff, new mayor, new judge, new political prison administration, new everyone. They'll just have to say they're really sorry, compensate the unlawfully jailed person couple million rubles, and forget the story like it never happened. Except it did, for a person who spent most of his life behind the bars. This twisted system does not just exist for small theft or minor drug charges. Sometimes it is used to fabricate extreme accusations for terrorism. A prime example, former Moscow district deputy Alexey Gorinov, who was already serving time for discrediting the Russian army. Recently, he found himself transferred to a stricter regime after a new charge of justifying terrorism surfaced, at first without him even knowing. Observers say that the moment he ended up in a prison hospital, a VKR agent, most likely someone from the FSB, was planted near him. This agent's mission was to steer Gorinov into making incriminating remarks about events the Russian government deems as terroristic acts, such as, for example, the strikes against the Crimean bridge. For Gorinov, this seemed just like another guy lying next to him on another bed, treated for more or less the same, even injuries. And if you've ever been to a hospital next to another person for an extended period of time, you probably know that eventually, well, you start bonding. You can't just ignore another person next to you for days and weeks. Sooner or later you start talking, especially when the entire mission of this another person is to befriend you and talk as much as possible. And that's how it started. Some small talk at first, some conversations about the family and friends, and then the talks about why he was sentenced in jail and how did he end up in a hospital. So obviously, when Alexey Gorinov said that he was jailed for discrediting the Russian army, he was hooked at that very moment. The FSB person started pushing deeper into this topic, asking more and more revealing questions, until eventually he started asking openly provocative questions about the actions of the Russian army, such as once again the attacks against the Crimean bridge. The authorities interpret these attacks not as acts of war, but as a straight-up terrorism. So if an inmate can be pressured or tricked into offering any statement that might be interpreted as justifying the bridge strikes, that inmate gets slapped with a fresh criminal case. By the time you realize you've said something questionable, it's already been recorded, filed, and used against you. Meanwhile, the VKR agent has done his part, successfully meeting the goals set by the security forces. This scheme is not limited to political prisoners, of course. Anyone can fall victim, but when it happens to well-known figures like Gorinov, it casts a harsh light on just how manipulative and downright cruel the system can be. A total of 10 years has been awarded to Alexey Gorinov, and most likely when his sentence is about to end, another FSB agent will be tasked to do something similar. The case of Gorinov is most likely one of hundreds, if not thousands, similar cases. But it is the one that got somewhat publicity in the Russian media, which can only mean one thing. He was loud enough and undesirable enough by the regime to bring such charges and actions against him. Most likely, he's not just average person who said something against Putin on the internet, no. He must know something. He was a part of the system, Moscow's district deputy at some point, so he should have some dirt on his upper management and maybe even Putin himself. Otherwise, why would Putin be so afraid of him to go through such extra steps of imprisoning a person, such as involving the FSB itself? Alexey Gorinov's case illustrates how quickly a regime can escalate charges against someone it already considers inconvenient. Initially, he spoke out against the war at a local council meeting in 2022. He questioned whether a district should be hosting cheerful events while Russia was bombing Ukrainian cities, which in his mind, and in the minds of many, simply was not right. That statement alone led to his first prison term for discrediting the Russian army. But it did not end here. Once locked up, he became a prime target for any new charges the authorities wanted to bring upon him. It is not just about silencing a single voice of dissent. The broader goal is to intimidate anyone who might speak up. If a man with a government position can be thrown behind bars, transferring to a stricter regime, then slapped with additional charges just for a private conversation in a prison hospital, well, what chance does anyone else have? People who have seen this happen become more aware, more fearful of expressing the slightest criticism of the government, and that's precisely what those in power want, a scared and silent population. But at the same time, this supposed strength of the regime is their biggest weakness. The cards are on the table. More and more people realize that such random incarcerations are not random at all. People realize that when a person gets arrested for holding a blank poster, all this is just to scare those who wanted to do the same. There are 145 million people living in Russia. It is physically impossible to arrest even 10% of them. But showing one person who got 10 years behind the bars, and most likely, unfortunately, will get more, this will stop hundreds of thousands from even thinking about speaking against the invasion out loud. The weakness of the regime is that more and more people realize that all of this is just a show. People should see that hundreds of their fellow countrymen openly do disagree with Putin, and nothing happens to them. The process has already started. I personally was able to convince some of my family members of this simple truth. And I sincerely hope that this idea will spread even further moving forward. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Happy New Year! If you are feeling in a cheerful holiday mood, you can support my work if you wish. There are links down below, such as PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions for early access to the episodes, ridiculous Russian propaganda extra chapter of this for this every single episode as well. Once again, all the links will be down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe